important to recognize that it's a volunteer organization that's continued for 40 years. And the second thing that I want you to know is that from my first introduction to the GMRG through today, it's clear that building relationships is what's important to this group, whether you're a doctoral student, an academic with significant experience, or a practitioner. It's our intent that you are welcomed and included. So I want to take just a quick minute to say, I'm forever grateful for the opportunity to meet and work with folks like Clay Weibark, Neva Weibark, Jack Wacker, Dennis Krumwiede, and Prakash Singh, who were especially present during my first few years with the organization. And I think what you would find is as you speak to other members of the organization, they're going to have other members that have been especially important in their initial engagement with the organization. Now, I think that there are hundreds of people that could probably be mentioned under that umbrella of inclusion and welcoming. But in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and keep us moving to the second part of the vision statement, which talks about through systematic study and research throughout the world, the GMRG aims to improve manufacturing supply chains through the development of theory and dissemination of results. So we have had over 150 collaborative projects across the years, and I think that's a great indicator that GMRG has continued to evolve and push forward in this area. And the last part of our vision statement says, by sharing ideas, results, and concepts with research colleagues and manufacturing executives around the globe, the GMRG serves to strengthen the linkage between research and practice. Now, the bold and the italics on this slide are my emphasis. And again, I think that's this strengthening that linkage between research and practice. We're honored to be able to maybe provide the environment that we can bring industry practitioners together and hopefully create a value-added experience for you. I'm going to take just one quick minute to talk about the activities that the GMRG has been involved in over the last 40 years. And again, there's no way that I'll cover all of them, but kind of the high points are, we typically do a survey on manufacturing practices about every 5 years. We have an annual GMRG conference, which rotates around the globe. In the last 5 years, we've met in Hungary, Australia, Canada, the United States. And this year, of course, was interesting. We were going to meet in China. We then moved it to Brazil, and now we've moved it to a virtual conference. So as you can see, we get around. We promote ongoing collaborations, both practitioner to academic and academic to academic. Again, I think those 150 completed collaborative projects over the last 40 years, as well as this, our first webinar, speaks to how engaged our community of researchers attempts to be. So our first GMRG webinar came about because of a conversation that Richard Davis and I had probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And Richard is our first speaker, and I'll be introducing him in a few minutes. But we were speaking about how things have changed in the manufacturing environment and what steps that they were taking to try to respond to this COVID-19 pandemic. So in these challenging times, it seemed like it would be a great time for the GMRG to host this type of webinar, to bring industry folks together and academics together to kind of understand a little bit better about what's going on and how organizations are responding to that. So I want to give thanks in particular to the organizing committee, Thomas Cole from Arizona State University, Adegoke Oke from Arizona State University, George Onofre, Artur Swearchek, Robert Wiedmer, and myself have been working for approximately 3 weeks on pulling this webinar together. As always, it's been a fun project to work with this group of people, and our hope is that you will find value add in participating, and we're hoping that you'll have questions. We have some time set aside at the end for a question and answer period. On that note, I want to go ahead and just take a look at the agenda. So we're pretty much through the introductory phase. I'm going to introduce Richard Davis here in just a few minutes. We have Brent Roberts and Andrea Binotto and Bartosz Hull. And then those are our industry speakers that will be coming up. And then we'll have our question and answer period at the end. In between each of those speakers, Adegoke Oke will take a few minutes to kind of introduce the next speaker and transition us from one to another. But in the interest of time, we thought it would be, and plus, since I know Richard well, it makes sense that I introduce Richard Davis as our first industry speaker. Let me share a little bit about Richard's background, and then I'll turn it over to him. Richard obtained a degree in chemical engineering from the University of Kentucky. He worked 7 years for Allied Signal, also known as Honeywell, and then moved on to work for Vanderbilt Chemical for 21 years in a variety of manufacturing and production roles. He's currently Vice President of the Murray Division, and I am also proud and lucky to call him a friend and neighbor. So I really appreciate him organizing his part of the presentation, and I'm glad to turn it over to him. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and allow Richard to share his screen. While we're doing that, I also wanted to mention Dwayne Wiltbank is also at Arizona State, and he has been instrumental in helping us organize the technical aspect of the presentation as well. So, and Richard, I think we're seeing the slides with the notes on it right now.
Okay, let me figure out how to swap it.
Okay.
I have to go back to sharing. Okay, let's try this again.
Perfect.
All right, good. I probably won't use many of my notes, but let's start off and welcome everyone. Again, Teresa introduced me as the Vice President for the Murray Division of Vanderbilt Chemicals. Vanderbilt Chemicals is composed of 2 chemical plants, and we are owned by RT Vanderbilt Holding. RT Vanderbilt Holding also owns some mining facilities on the East Coast and out west, and we have other resale business also. Go to the next slide, if I can get it to change. There we go. Can everyone see it? Second one?
We can.
All right, great. Some of the products that we manufacture, we have two sides to our plant. One is the chemical side. We make additives for the petroleum industry, rubber industry, plastics, and paint and varnish. A lot of the petroleum industry the products are used for motor oils, cutting oils, high pressure greases. Rubber mainly is for curing, antioxidants, plastics for stabilizing, the polyurethane foam, paints and varnishes, mainly for a hard finish or a drying time in an industrial setting. There's many applications. We sell to a lot of the big companies that you probably have heard of, and some of the middlemen, third-party organizations. With the minerals side of things, we have mines that are out west, Arizona, Nevada, California, and we mine volcanic clay ore deposits. And the main component in those is an aluminum magnesium silicate clay. So what we do, we mine it out west and bring it to the Murray, Kentucky facility where we purify it, pasteurize it, dry it, and package it. And that material in different varieties, different blends, we put some other materials with it, and that determines whether it goes into the pharmaceutical, personal care, industrial, or agri-science segments. And with regard to the pharmaceutical, we're talking pills, solutions, personal care. You're probably mainly talking about like hand lotions, toothpaste, other compositions that you need thickeners. And our ingredient is an inert ingredient that is the component that does the dilution. In the industrial settings, ceramics, that sort of chinaware, stuff like that. In the agri-science, we may be used as the dispersant, the diluent for herbicides, pesticides, different type sciences and along those lines. All right, and our plant in the chemical side, we produce about 24 million pounds per year. It's batch chemistry, so many starts and stops throughout the year, in a variety of different chemical products, roughly 70 to 80, depending upon how each year goes. In the minerals industry, we produce about 4 million pounds per year, and it's a continuous process. We have 4 shifts that run all year long, and we have 97 employees. Early in our effort to get ahead of this COVID-19, my boss, Mr. Vanderbilt, who owns the plant, owns the company, he began contacting me about mid-February, and that was because our corporate headquarters is in Norwalk, Connecticut. So he's asking me if I have a plan, and early in that time frame, we started developing a plan. Well, that led further to a corporate person being assigned to lead a morning meeting every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday amongst all the plant leaders, mines and plant leaders. And we discuss everything with regard to from health of the employees, the morale, who do we have quarantined, as far as any media coverage, whether it be what's the governor saying that we need to do now, any health official requirements, any of those type of things. Also, we cover the amount of infection in the county where our business is located, our particular businesses are located, and why. So those things are always covered, and we want to make sure that we're cognizant of what's causing these problems. We've also gone through several strategic measures with regard to our staffing, and I'll go over some of that later. Inventory monitoring with regard to our personal protective equipment, our disinfectant. We also require our employees to do some temperature monitoring. And, of course, we were looking for thermometers. But because we were so far ahead of many because of contact from my boss saying we need to get something together early, we were able to purchase many of the items that are so hard to get a hold of now and have been throughout some of this. With regard to some of that early planning, we got to thinking, well, what if we can't stay well in the plant to run our essential business? Then we need to develop a shutdown procedure and determine who the minimal staffing would be required to run any permit required facilities in the plant, or parts of the plant, to stay compliant with our water, air, different EPA type requirement, and other things with regard to our personnel while we are running. Several years we've had in place waivers. Our employees, since we're in the chemical industry and the minerals, we have to use respirators or full face or supplied air on different occasions. But we also provide the N95 type respirators. And we've had in place probably 10 plus years a waiver with everyone saying, you have been trained, we do a good job of that, but it is up to you to choose the correct respirator. Well, another thing with regard to that everybody needs to be aware of, that respirators aren't a foolproof device to keep you protected. There are things that can happen to you. So, whether you choose the right respirator, whether it's for dust, gases, and this COVID-19. Well, this COVID-19, there's no guarantee that a respirator is going to keep you well. So that's what this waiver is for. We also, early on, started working on our corporate-wide infectious disease procedure. We really didn't have something in place because of what was based upon what was going on. So we developed our infectious disease procedure. With regard to some of the things that our governors in our states are doing, we were a little bit fearful that maybe we would be imposed with curfews or other restrictions that would keep our employees from coming to work. But one of the early things that I did, I worked with the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce and got a letter that was written basically by a lawyer and tweaked it just a little and adjusted it to our company letterhead and issued it to every one of our employees. That way they had it in their car, on their person, in case they were stopped by the Kentucky State Police or someone that said, hey, you're not supposed to be out. Well, here I have a letter. I'm going to work. We did the same thing for some of our contractors. We had a contractor.
I'm just doing a quick time check here, and I think we've just got a minute or two left.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I wondered if it would be possible. I know that you all have done some interesting things with your illness monitoring. Could you talk about your thermal imaging, and then maybe we'll just kind of bring it to a close after that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. In regard to illness monitoring, we've done a lot of contact tracing, response documentation, what we would do in the event someone became hot or ill in the plant, and what we would have to do and send them out. Going through the last thing that we are the most recent thing that we're doing is to try to avoid that is a thermal imaging camera. We bought this piece of equipment. We had to buy the laptop separate. But the way it works, you can see in the diagram there, that's just some literature from the purchase. And that's how you set it up, 5 feet distance between the thermal heat source and the camera. And it's hooked up to a laptop. And then we take everyone's temperature. You step in front of it. It takes 1 second to grab your temperature, take your hard hat off, your safety glasses off. It will find your face. It will take your temperature and then tell you whether you're hot or you're not. And you can look on the graph that's shown in that picture, and you see a lot of data points where those were other employees that took their temperature. Well, then you see this individual that came up hot. Well, then we pull that person aside, and we have the supervisor get involved. He will put the appropriate PPE on in case this person is infected. Then he will test his own temperature, make sure this unit is working properly, and then the employee will get back in front of this thing, take his temperature again. If he is still hot, then we'll take a handheld thermometer, non-contact, and take his temperature. And then if he's still unsure, we're going to use our contact tracing documentation, find out where he had been. We're going to complete all that, and then we're going to send him home. And then from there, we'll do some more monitoring, be on the phone with him and find out what we need to do. But if he's determined that he is well, we will send him back to work. So this is a new tool. We're still learning, trying to figure it out, but it monitors surface temperature. It does not monitor your core temperature, of course. So there is some curve there. There's some amount of threshold that we have to figure out where is going to be our 95% confidence level on where we need to set our threshold for an alarm point.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Richard. We appreciate you sharing that. I know that you did have some other practices in terms of external engage, like with carriers and that. What we may do is if there's questions about that or time in the question and answer period, we might bounce back to that. But to kind of keep us on schedule, I'm going to go ahead and ask, can you go to the slide about the question and answer so we can show that real quick?
Okay, yes.
And then, so if you have questions, please enter them in the question and answer feature on Zoom. We're going to capture those questions at the end. And Richard, if you can go ahead and stop sharing now, we'll go ahead and Adegoke, do you want to introduce the next speaker for us?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce Brent Roberts. He's the Vice President of Supply Chain from Gore Associates, and Brent is joining us from Phoenix. He's going to be talking about changing practices in manufacturing operations as a result of COVID-19. Brent, over to you.
Oh, great. Thanks for the introduction. Let me just bring up a slide here and we can get started. Let's go here, do this. Just confirm that you're seeing full screen.
Correct.
All right, I will shrink this just because I'm not sure if that shows up. All right, so thanks very much for the introduction. Good day to everyone. I'm not sure if we're all joining from the same time zones, so I'll leave it at that. Just really quick. Oh, all right. Just really quick on my background. I joined Gore about 3 years ago. I spent about 17 years in microelectronics with IBM and Intel. My background for undergraduate and graduate studies is material science and macromolecular sciences. And I also very positively have a MBA from the University or Arizona State University as well. So big shout out to my fellow ASU friends and family on the line today. So I thought I'd take a minute. I probably don't have as extensive of slides and I don't have a bunch of background, but I'll talk a little bit about who we are in WL Gore. We are a multifaceted private company. I specifically work on the medical side. So we have 4 big divisions, medical, performance solutions. So this is our aero, auto, cable, such company portion, and then fabric, which I think everyone's probably most familiar with is the Gore-Tex fabric, especially if you're active in your outside environment. Probably you are a holder of some of our active wear. So when you think of the medical side, just think of us taking that same Gore-Tex clothing and developing implantable devices in the vascular, cardiac and the general medical kind of fields, right? Myself, I work quite extensively across the strategy side of things, and then as well as in our cardiac business. But I'll share a couple of thoughts and ideas and practices that we implemented based on the current environment that I think we are all experiencing. Some are very similar to what Richard talked about, so I'll try to spend a little more time on those that maybe are a little bit different. And I will be cognizant of time, but I think I get a couple extra minutes because Richard went over a little bit. So the first one that we have up here, and I know Richard talked to this a little bit, is really our first primary focus for our entire company was based on our associate safety and our associate experience. So we, like many other companies, based on the businesses that we were in, were deemed essential by the different governments. Our headquarters is based out of Delaware. The majority of our manufacturing for medical is based here in Arizona, Phoenix and Flagstaff campuses, as well as a campus in Silicon Valley in California. So all of those were deemed essential by local governments. And so because of that, we were able to continue our manufacturing practices throughout the current environment. To do that, again, I want to just circle back to this. Our primary concern was the safety of our associates. So kind of a lot of our first practices and steps were to really set up an entire pandemic team, right? So this pandemic team would represent not only the US, but our global footprint. So we are a global company. We have associates in the majority of the regions throughout the world. And so we set up an enterprise-based or corporate-based pandemic team, and then some of our more local teams just to handle the differences in some of the government interpretations of some of the direction that's coming in and some of the regulations and rules for that specific state. And so really the start of that was that implementation and adherence to the governing bodies. So CDC, WHO, FDA and such. So a lot of us on the medical side have some pretty close associations with each of these government agencies. We actually sit on boards as well with many of them. So a lot of it for them as well was trying to learn through this and how to actively support those areas of essential manufacturing and create policy that allowed us to continue what we do. And so that next aspect is we developed this plant level guidance, and what we utilized in this case was a Gartner framework. So we followed some of the ideas that they have been sharing out broadly in a lot of their touch points through webinars and whatnot, and we developed this plant level guidance from a level 1 to a level 4, with the level 4 being the most severe based on distance of the most recent case within your community, percentage of utilization of ICU beds in your hospital, so on and so forth. I think the next thing we kind of created was we had to create awareness for all of our partners across the pretty complex supply chain. So being that we're 4 divisions and we deal with everything from medical devices to cable and wiring, we really had to create these dashboards and these daily stand-up meetings. There was a lot going on, both with the indirect aspects, so the consumables, so all the PPE gear. For medical, most of us operate in a class 6, 7, or 8 clean room. So we wear everything from gowns to hairnets to beard covers to masks and everything in between. So we had to ensure that a lot of the same PPE requirements that you're hearing about are utilized in today's hospital environment were available for us because it's required for our manufacturing environment. So we created that supply chain dashboard with those daily stand-ups. We also communicated with our essential business message to all our suppliers. So again, Richard talked about going out and securing letters of essential business and basically letters for employees, associates to pass through any checkpoints within the area. We helped work with our supply base to do that both for us and our local governments. And if there was anything needed for our partners, that we could help support them to ensure that these similar designations were provided for them and the similar levels of letters and pass-through were available in person for their employees. I think the next one's really important. And if you're not familiar with a sales and operations plan, it's really a demand and supply review associated with lead time. So typically we would do this on a monthly cadence. That changed very rapidly. We started to do this more on a weekly basis and really looked at our day-to-day build plans to make sure that we were utilizing the inputs we had from our tier 1, tier 2 suppliers on availability of their goods in relationship to our bill of materials, bills of information that we needed to continue to support our life-saving device. The other thing I think is our frequency with communication with those tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers really increased. We probably went from talking to them once a week to multiple times a week to multiple times a day to pretty much all day long, every day. So, I mean, it goes without saying, if anyone hasn't experienced that working from home is a lot more stressful than actually working from the office during these times, I'd be open to hearing any of that feedback and tidbits on how you're balancing. But there's just a lot more communication that's required between your partners to ensure that you can really orchestrate a supply chain in today's environment. So that was really important for us as we changed some of those practices. Excuse me one second, I'm gonna clear my throat. And then I think that next piece was, diving deeper and deeper into that tier 1 and tier 2 supply chain. So this was looking at their labor concerns. So clearly, there are impact in all of or many of the regions throughout the world. So really understanding what that impact may be from an inability to participate in a day-to-day work function. That could be because of childcare. That could be because of an illness. That could be for extended risk associated with the pre-existing, so on and so forth. So we really had to understand how that applied to labor, transportation, and supply. And being a global company, we've experienced a lot of challenges on moving our devices, from our US locations to our global locations, just based again on the availability of transportation and the availability of shipping lanes. The other thing we've been doing quite a bit is we've been piloting kind of these new crowdsourcing software applications. The intent of this is to provide us further and further early warnings into where we may see impact based on a challenge or an issue arising within a geographical location. So that's been extremely helpful. There are a lot of good cases and providers of that available today. So we've been kind of looking in different aspects and partnering with some of those groups as well. The other thing we started to do is secure our raw materials for longer terms. And really that's in both direct and indirect. So again, when you look at the PPE, hand sanitizer, masks, so on and so forth, is working with and finding providers that can commit to longer durations of supply, and then the same in any of our raw materials associated with our devices. We talked a little bit about the distribution and logistic aspects. We really have to provide a lot of proactive communication and collaboration with our freight forwarders. Again, in this time, we're carrying different levels of inventory because demand clearly has softened when you look at emergent versus elective kind of case use. And we provide devices in both of those categories. And so we had to be prepared. Instead of reducing our supply, we wanted to keep our supply moving as closely to normal as possible, knowing that we would see a strong bounce back at some point in time within the environment. And we didn't want to, increase any risk of not having our devices available in times of need. And then that last piece is just that tactical daily execution, right? Really specific to the region of need and really specific to the associates in each of those regions. So that's varied, and that's been somewhat challenging to kind of balance that out. So I think in fairness, I'm kind of at about my 10 minutes and maybe try to make up a wee bit of time. So I'll just kind of verbally say it. Again, if you have kind of any questions or comments that you'd like to be addressed at a later point in our Q&A section, please use that chat at the bottom to enter them in, and we can go from there.
Thank you so much, Brent. That was very interesting. Again, if you have any questions for Brent or for Richard, please use the Q&A function, and we'll try and address the questions at the end of the presentation. Now we move on to the last one. And it's my pleasure to welcome Andrea Binotto and Bartosz. Both of them are from Electrolux, all the way from Poland. Thank you guys for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you. I will start to share. Do you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks as first for the invitation. I'm really glad to share our experience with you and our pain with you. Let me just introduce a little bit the company. Not sure that all of you know the company. We are talking about the company that has a production basically of around 50 million appliances, home appliances overall Europe, 16 plants. Plus also we are producing, we are also selling through OEM suppliers. And we are basically covering all type of home devices, from dishwasher to hobs to cooker hoods to small appliances, vacuum cleaner. And specifically, me and Bartosz are responsible for the supply area of Europe, major appliances. And our headquarters is in Stockholm, but our control tower, where we basically deal with the entire supply chain for Europe, is based in Poland. We are around 150 people there, planning transport, supply, production, material, spares, and the launches, new launch products. So this is a short introduction about that. I'm specifically responsible for, I'm the director for the supply and transport plan. I just wanted to start with a deep impact, visual impact with you. Usually the color red is negative, and this is the case. Why? Basically, you know that in Europe, we started to suffer of coronavirus basically end of February, beginning of March. Before March, everything was very much fine, except for a simple reason that China was the one starting with the coronavirus. And we have almost 20% of our component supplier based in China. So it means that in February, everyone from Europe was hurrying with express deliveries from China in order to bring as much as components possible to grant production, because still Europe was not affected. Our sales was going very well in Europe. Our factories were all open. What happened then? It happened then we were basically creating stock of components in our warehouses to make sure that production could run for the next couple of months. And then suddenly coronavirus started in Italy. I'm from Italy, so I know the situation very well. And what happened? Basically happened that drama started there. We have 5 factories there in Europe, in Italy, sorry. And immediately the government took strong action. Basically, we have been forced to close the factories. Just after that, also in Europe, coronavirus started to spread out. We were not being forced to close the factories, but we have been forced to close the factory because of sales drop. So the effect in March, starting from March, and you can see in the column factory, these are all our factories. We have factories in Hungary, in Italy, in Poland, in Germany, in Romania, in Ukraine as well. And we started to suffer because of demand decrease. So automatically, we have been forced to close the factories. Going to which situation? To the situation that basically we had to focus mainly on securing our cash flow. The investment was already there. Stock was already increased because of components to secure capacity. But at the same time, sales dropped by 50%. So it means that starting from April, we saw a drop of 50% overall Europe. It's a big drama for us, and it's still. How did we react? We reacted simply to secure our cash flow, taking immediate actions to safeguard the group finances. So basically, we cut all no priorities, not vital activities in the company. What does it mean? It means that we stopped all our major investments, for example, in new warehouses, for stocking any components or finished goods. We stop all traveling. We stop even salary increase. So we stop everything that could save cash flow. Why? Because we had to save the cash flow to restart as soon as the business would have restarted. And we see the restart already now. So we prioritize our priorities. And then, as you can see here from the graph, we expect a growth in sales in the remaining part of the year and coming back to normality from 2021. So basically, we divided our strategy in 3 main, pillars. The first pillar is what we call 2 4 weeks. So what does it mean for us? It means that we have been preparing the ramp up of our production main facilities. We know that this situation will not last forever. So we had to proper set up components availability, our tier suppliers, proper projection of sales, accurate mix, in the next couple of weeks. Why? Because as soon as we could restart our production, we should have been prepared for that. The second thing is that our Italian manufacturing, here we had to negotiate and to work very strictly with unions, with Italian government in order to secure our manufacturing site in terms of safety, health and safety, to create all the conditions to restart. And that was a strong achievement because unions in Italy are very extremely strong. The third point is that we had also to secure our suppliers in Italy. Italy is basically supplying 20% of overall components in Europe. So suppliers were close in Italy. So also there we had to work with suppliers, with local government, with central government in order to make sure that supplier could restart slowly, at least to allow us to ramp up our production. Then as a second pillar, Q2. So we created top-down scenario in demand plan. So a central demand plan, not created by each company, but coming from, let me say, top management. And based on that, we have planned our production. So based on low sales scenario, with reducing as much as possible our stock as finished goods. So our strategy was to reduce the finished good. How? Reducing the target stock level. This means that also SAP was automatically calculating less replenishment flow into our warehouses. Third, we instead invested in components availability. So it means that we have been trying to secure with our suppliers 25% of flexibility in case of our sales could have ramped up quicker than what was supposed. And also we have tried to postpone payments with our suppliers. Third pillar, Q3 and Q4. We support the recovery of the market. So we expect that we will come back gradually to normality, ramping up also our production. Very quickly, our proposed production for strategy 2020. Again, we use a top-down optimistic demand project plan for May and December right now, while for March, April, we use a top-down pessimistic demand project. Second point, as I said before, we are preparing an upside flexibility from all our main suppliers, component suppliers, especially if you think about Chinese supplier, where the lead time horizon is quite long for transport. And the third point is that we have weekly review of demand plan and production plan, really checking per each company, which is the demand, which is the mix, which is the consumption, in order to make sure that our production is really fitting the demand and we are not producing for stock. I think that now I can leave it to Bartosz.
Is Bartosz? Yep.
Are you there, Bartosz?
We have just a couple of minutes left.
Is Bartosz connected? Okay, I can continue till he's back. Here you can see more in detail, which is our stock strategy. So for finished good and European and Chinese component. So here we try to minimize as much as possible our stock value. Consider that now we are on a double stock value compared to our target. So it's really strong effort to reduce it. The second point is European components. So here we are basically, we started from, as I said before, creating extra stock to secure capacity. Then right now we are trying to secure flexibility more than capacity. And with the Chinese components, initially we are trying to refill as much as possible our warehouse with Chinese components. And during the month of March and April, we could not stop containers coming from China. So we had to accept that. So we decreased a lot of demand towards Chinese components. And now shortly we are trying to increase slowly, very slowly. Supply chain focus in the next month. I think that this is the last slide. Just check, yeah. So our main focus area for the next month. So we are focusing mainly on covering some main markets where the business is very strong and where the margin is extremely high. For Europe, we are talking about Benelux, Germany, Switzerland, Nordic, and C clusters, so the east part of Europe. So it means that also in production, we are setting up priorities for these specific markets. Second point is to secure production ramp up in all European factories during May. For material planning, We are canceling all unneeded components inflow and securing flexibility for fast production increase. Fourth point is sustainability. So we want to come back to the normal level that we have in transport for rail intermodal utilization in Europe. Our target is 40% this year of total transport to be used via rail and intermodal. And safety. So always stay safe, keep home office. So all our employees, white collars, are working from home right now in Europe, and we are preparing a safe return to office. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrea and Bartosz. That was, again, another very interesting presentation. Now we'll move to the Q&A session with the panel. And again, if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please use the Q&A function. I'm going to start by asking a general question, and any one of the panel members can take this. So what do you think would be the key changes to your operations post-COVID, both your manufacturing and supply chain operations post-COVID? What have you learned during this time that, you know, will be enduring, that you intend to take forward? Anyone can take that.
This is Brent. I'll jump in really quick. I think probably one of the hardest challenges moving forward is going to be that safety associated with each of the employees. So as we continue to work through, for instance, like the 6-foot distance requirements, we have to now look at our layouts, right? For a long time in supply chain, we've been saying, hey, compress space utilization. And now in an environment with like the current situation, that may not be ideal. So we are really re-looking at that piece internally. And I think probably externally, the biggest piece is we have made a lot of progress with closer communication with our suppliers. An awareness, creating the dashboards, I think is something that we will continue moving forward.
Thanks, Brent. Does anybody else have something to add?
Yeah, I will connect what about Brent said, that I mean, for us, we are investing more and more in a partnership approach with our suppliers, key supplier. So we identified both in transport materials, some key supplier with whom we are going to sign, and we already started to sign long-term agreements. We are not working anymore year by year with contract year by year, but we are really investing together in some common strategies. Yeah. And this will pay, especially in the period where suppliers have to decide who to prioritize, which customer to prioritize, and we want to be prioritized.
Okay. I have a couple of questions here from the attendees. This is from Swati Rupani, and the question is for Andrea. How did Electrolux ensure continuous production and reduce dependency on containers coming from China, since you guys procure 90% from China? So this is for Electrolux. Andrea?
Bartosz, do you want to take? I take it.
Yeah, the containers, I mean, the strategy implemented by us is to, of course, see high numbers caused by optimistic scenario, but also keep very much chained this short-term production planning. So use the flexible solution, whatever is there in place in quite tough mode to balance the stock, which is in the whole chain, thanks to that. So at the end, whatever is on the way, this is already confirmed. Yeah. Then we are looking more in the future and compare it with the currently ongoing sales and the production executed. So also the components consumption, and based on that, we rather manage this middle and the long term. Whatever is in the short term, as I said, we consider it as mostly gone. Also, the percentage is not that much clear to me. The percentage mentioned, the split is a bit different.
Thank you, Bartosz. We have two questions for Brent. The first one is from Marcio Thurman, and the question is, how are you using crowdsourced software monitoring real time? And I'll ask the second question because they're sort of related, and this is from Professor Weibach. It's good to have you here, Professor Weibach. Professor Weibach, as you heard earlier, was the founder of GMRG. And his question is, what have you learned from your crowdsourcing experiment? So if you'd like to address those two questions, Brent.
Yeah, of course. So two really good questions. So again, the use of crowdsourcing software is pretty new to us. Something that we've been evaluating in the past, but two big issues really helped us determined this was the right path to go. One was when you look at the total amount of information that's being shared broadly across all of the different regions of the world, it's just too much information for us as a company to digest. Us partnering with some of these crowdsourced software solution providers allowed them to disseminate the information into little nuggets of thought for us. For instance, right now, everybody's looking at the potential opportunities of reopening their country, their state, their local community. We were able to use that to start to determine like when hospitals were moving away from just emergent cases to elective cases, right? So giving us an idea on another data set on what's the response to demand, how are communities reopening. So that was really, really key. What we've learned is the data augmentation, the data real-time activities, we can look at a much broader data set in a much quicker amount of time and allow us to feed that into some of our daily tactical activities. So what we feel is it's a closer connection to our customer patient base, and it's really going to help us improve on levels of customer satisfaction in the long run, because now we're responding real time to what they're feeling within their potential community.
Thanks, Brent. We have another question for Brent, and this question is from Asila Agigi. I know Asila personally. She's calling from University of Pretoria in South Africa. And the question is, you mentioned that you increase communication with your multi-tier suppliers. How complex is your supply base, and how did you manage to reach up to the tier 2 suppliers? And then post-COVID, do you find the need to consolidate your supply base, or rather to expand it to secure supply?
Yeah, great questions again, and very nice to meet you. So on the first part of that question, how complex is it? You know, from the medical side, it's a relatively complex environment because of the regulatory challenges associated with implanting these materials or these components into the human body. So what we've done is we've used ABC analysis, so really tiered our suppliers on level of strategic importance for this current time frame, and really dove deep in with our tier A, or our top strategic suppliers, to ensure, you know, that they have security in their tier 1, 2, and 3, which would be our tier 2, 3, and 4. And so it's been partnering with them. It's been opening up our leadership to provide guidance, to provide support to their leadership team. So if they felt like, hey, you know, we have this conversation with the tier 2 supplier and we can't really move the needle on the importance, but you know, if a Gore leader sat in one of these conversations and helped express the importance to their life-saving device supply chain, they may see things differently. And I think that's where we've been bridging that gap in the communication and developing that relationship. So it's the rapport building in that aspect. And I think that, you know, post-COVID, we will probably consolidate in certain areas. Like we've seen risk, right? So, and we've done the same analysis. We've looked at risk-based supply chain evaluations and metrics as well. We've seen some risk, so we may pivot to new. But in general, we've also seen risk because of our dependency on sole sourcing. And so we will also in key areas expand the supply chain to alleviate that sole source risk.
Thank you, Brent. We have another question, and this question, any one of the panel members can take this question. And this is from Professor Ihie from Kansas State. Professor Ihie is an active member of GMRG, has been, still is. And the question is, what role do you see digitalization playing post-COVID-19 pandemic? Digitalization. Any one of you can take this.
I have a issue with how we interact with our carriers. This is Richard, by the way. And our big push was to eliminate employees from becoming in contact with the carriers. Well, there's a lot of paperwork involved, and I'm looking for a way that things are done digitally. I was unable to find it, you know, in terms of some tablet app or something that where we can exchange data, exchange information, bill of ladings, and different forms, just to keep people social distance. So, you know, that's something that I am looking for, and like Brent said, I believe, and maybe the difficulty of working from home is there, but I've learned that we can make it work.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. We have another question from Professor Weiberg, and this is to Richard or anyone. What have your HR people learned about operating with the physical restrictions?
As far as our plant, we've not had much, much problem with regard to, as our work rolls along, a big portion of the responsibility with regard to our folks has to do with how the supervisors instruct those employees to follow our new procedures. You know, all the social distancing and PPE use and a lot of the Monday, Wednesday, Friday phone calls that I'm involved with corporate and all the other business leaders is the point where things develop. And then I don't even really include our HR department. I include all of my staff, and then they distribute. HR is one portion of my staff, so it's kind of how it works.
Oh, sorry, Richard. This is Brent. Just one thing I'd quickly add, as well as an awareness that each associate experiences these physical restrictions differently, like their interpretation is a little bit different. And so it's not a one size fits all. You really have to, pulse the organization to determine where they feel there's an issue or where they feel the successes are, and then try to build off from that.
Okay, thank you. So this is the last question we're going to take, and then we'll end the session. So this is to anyone. What key drivers of potential supply chain, and this is from George, by the way. George Onofre is also a professor and an active member of GMRG. What key drivers of potential supply chain vulnerability have you identified in your business? Anyone can take this. Key drivers of supply chain vulnerability have you identified?
I think one is I'll just throw it out there really quickly, is when you look at the direction today to limit our personal movement into the community, right? So a lot of people are utilizing different modes of transportation or delivery into just groceries into their own home. So transportation logistics is really a vulnerability in that you have to balance your ability to ship your product versus the needs of the community as well. And that just takes a lot of planning.
Thank you. So we have one more question. I wasn't going to take any other question, but I think this question is very, very interesting because it was also a question that I wrote down. So thank you, Nick Narlock, for asking this question. Nick says he works in the designer furniture industry with procurement and production, where the company operates extremely lean with inventories. We know JIT, we know lean. What are your thoughts on how JIT strategies will change going forward in general or with your firm, when it seems that many companies have pushed to optimize operations to be as lean as possible? And that's the last thing you want in a COVID crisis as we've had. What are your thoughts? Anyone can take this.
This is Richard. I think and I don't know how this works as far as just in time. We don't use just in time. We're a make to stock plant. But the option of having secondary suppliers, having more than one option, has worked well for us, because we have had some problems getting supply, and we've had to go to another facility where, thank goodness, they had it.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to stop the Q&A here to at least be able to keep to some of the promises we made in terms of time. Just to end this, I would like to thank all the speakers for their time and for sharing their experiences. And I also like to thank everyone that has signed into this webinar for attending. GMRG has been dedicated to working with academics, and increasingly we are looking at working more with the industry folks. So we welcome participation from both academics and practitioners. And if you'd like to know more about GMRG, please feel free to go to gmrg.org.